The dropship's ramp hissed open, exhaling a thick cloud of sterilized vapor. Crucible Base stood like a scar on the moon's surface, obsidian-black towers bristling with antennae, artillery, and drill scaffolding. Harsh light from the dwarf star overhead bathed the recruits in silvery hues. Dust swirled around their boots as each new cadet stepped into line, their species varied and intimidating. Chitin-plated Zellari with glowing thoraxes, telepathic Draven with faces like crystalline masks, and a six-limbed Ogren that could crush a tank with its bare fists. And then there was him, human, too tall, too thin, too soft. Cadet Jackson Reeve adjusted the straps of his standard-issue coalition armor. It didn't fit quite right, made for broader shoulders, longer arms. His boots were scuffed from Earth's soil. He stood quietly in formation, shoulders squared, jaw set. His brown eyes scanned the alien architecture ahead, the gravity a fraction too light, every breath sharp with sterilized ozone. A deep, metallic stomp cut through the murmuring ranks. From the barracks emerged a towering figure wrapped in segmented armor, matte black with plasma scorch patterns that looked more like trophies than wear. His lower arms carried a stun rod and data pad. His upper pair were crossed over his massive chest. Sergeant Major Threx, Vakari Warborn, veteran of the Skarn sieges, and known across 3 sectors as a drill sergeant who once made a star beast cry. His eyes, a fierce amber glow beneath a helmet's slit, swept the new arrivals. When he spoke, his voice was a low, grinding rumble, like a reactor core threatening meltdown. "Welcome to my crucible. Some of you will leave as warriors. The rest will leave in body bags." A ripple of uneasy chuckles echoed from the recruits, forced, awkward. Threx didn't smile. He stopped dead in front of Reeve. "What in the name of a neutron split is that?" Silence. Reeve met his eyes and said nothing. Threx looked to his data pad, then back to Reeve, as if it had to be an error. "Terran, Homo sapien, single heart, no exoskeleton, no genetic augmentation, not even venom sacs. What do you have? Toenails." Laughter erupted behind Reeve. One of the Zellari clicked its mandibles in amusement. A Draven gave a psychic nudge to his neighbor, broadcasting primitive mammal to half the squad telepathically. Threx leaned in close. "Which primitive tribe sent you here, ape?" Reeve spoke, low and steady. "I volunteered, sir." "Oh, you volunteered, did you?" "Of course you did. The rest of your kind are probably still busy chasing fire with sticks." Reeve didn't blink. He didn't smile. He stood straighter. That annoyed Threx more than an insult would have. "You think you're ready for the crucible, Cadet Reeve? You'll be lucky if you survive the first day." He turned to the formation and growled, "You break it. You carry it. Until further notice, this hairless runt is your squad's responsibility. If he trips, you fall. If he fails, you all burn." The squad groaned. "Now, move out." As the cadets filed toward the barracks, Threx turned away, but not before stealing one last look at the human. The boy was still standing tall, still quiet, but his fists were clenched, not in fear, in control. That unreadable calm didn't match the rest of him. It was something else, something Threx couldn't quite place. He made a low sound in his throat, half growl, half laugh. "Let's see how long you last, monkey." The second sun hadn't yet risen when the wake klaxons screamed through Crucible Base like banshees. Cadet Reeve was already up, lacing his boots, sweat glistening on his brow from a pre-dawn run. The rest of the squad groaned and stumbled from their beds, but Reeve had learned quickly. Comfort was a luxury, and hesitation got you noticed, and not in a good way. Out on the drill field, gravity was cranked to 2.6 Gs, and oxygen was thinned to simulate combat on Varnix 5. The alien cadets handled it well, Vakari bone structure, Zilari multi-lung systems, Draven with internal telekinetic support. Reeve, though, was suffering. Every step was like pushing through molasses while someone sat on his chest. Sergeant Threx paced between recruits as they hauled supply crates across the uneven terrain. His voice echoed from his voice amp. These crates simulate 30 kilos under Varnic's gravity. If any of you drop one, especially you, Terran, I'll have your asses on latrine duty until your species evolves thumbs. Reeve's vision blurred. His heartbeat thundered in his ears. A spiderweb of red burst across his right eye, but he kept moving. Behind him, the Ogren cadet tripped and crashed into a pile of gravelcrete. Threx didn't stop. Get up. If you're conscious, you're combat ready. The Ogren groaned. Reeve, without hesitation, dropped his own crate and hauled the massive cadet back to his feet. The weight nearly snapped his spine in two. Every muscle screamed. Threx watched, impassive. Later, during the zero-atmosphere obstacle drill, Reeve's oxygen line ruptured, a micro-tear from a previous fall. Alarms blared inside his suit. His HUD flashed warnings. O2 levels critical. Depressurization imminent. Threx noticed from the control deck. He tapped a communication. Med drone dispatched. Sit tight, Terran. But Reeve wasn't listening. He knelt mid-drift, pulled a length of sealant tape from his thigh pouch, and patched the rupture with one practiced motion. He exhaled twice to purge CO2, adjusted his regulator manually, and pushed off toward the exit with a short blast from his maneuver pack. By the time the drone arrived, he was already clearing the next checkpoint. Threx narrowed his glowing eyes. Well, damn. Back at the barracks, Reeve collapsed onto his bunk. His bunkmate, a reptilian Murtaugh named Gall, stared at him in stunned silence. You could have died. Reeve didn't respond at first. He simply peeled off his sweat-soaked shirt. Angry red bruises traced his back where the crate straps had dug in deep. Blood caked his right knuckle. He looked like he'd been in a crash. Finally, he spoke. Then I'd die, but I wouldn't quit. Gal blinked, processing that. That's not bravery. That's insanity. Reeve managed a tired grin. On Earth, we call it Tuesday. Word of the incident spread faster than a calm virus. The other cadets still didn't speak to him much, but they no longer mocked him. There was wariness in their eyes now, curiosity, maybe even a shred of respect. And from his observation perch, Threx watched the Terran's footage again, watched how he taped the line mid-spin, watched the pain tolerance, the situational awareness, the refusal to fold. He scratched at his chin, armor plating groaning. There's something off about that one. He didn't laugh this time. He just marked Reeve's file. Subject, Human Cadet Reeve. Jackson. Behavioral note. Doesn't know when to stop. Assessment. Dangerous.
The arena lights snapped on like the judgment of gods. Metal walls sealed shut behind the cadets, the air thick with tension and plasma haze. The ground trembled faintly, like the arena itself was anticipating blood. On the far end, gates creaked open, revealing today's matchup. Cadet Reeve versus Cadet Hone, a purebred Ogren, 2.4 meters tall, 600 pounds of armored muscle and bone, a walking siege engine. The crowd of recruits roared, bets already flying. No one was wagering on the human. Reeve stood still in the sand, helmet tucked under one arm. No armor beyond standard plating, no enhancements, just grit and strategy, and the dull ache in his shoulder that never quite went away. High above in the command observation deck, Sergeant Threx loomed over the proceedings, arms folded. Begin! The gong slammed like thunder. Hone charged faster than his bulk should allow. The arena shook with each step. Reeve moved, not to meet him, but to evade, rolling to the side and skimming just past the Ogren's shoulder. Sand exploded from the impact crater Hone left behind. The crowd booed. They wanted a brawl. Reeve wasn't giving them one. He kept his distance circling, forcing Hone to waste energy. He'd studied the Ogren, his patterns, his confidence. Overconfidence. The second charge came faster, and this time Reeve didn't quite clear it. The edge of Holmes' forearm clipped his ribs, sending him flying. Crack! He landed hard, skidding across the ground, blood spattering from his nose and mouth. A ripple of concern flickered through the watchers, but he wasn't down for long. Reeve dragged himself upright, spitting red, eyes locked on Holmes, still standing. Threx leaned forward. "What are you made of, Terran?" Reeve limped toward the fallen pieces of the shattered arena wall. Holmes charged again, and that's when Reeve did something no one expected. He ran toward Holmes. The crowd gasped. Holmes' grin widened. This was the moment the human lost his mind. Reeve veered at the last second, slid beneath the Ogren's legs, grabbed a shard of debris, and drove it into the arena floor behind him. He triggered his suit's emergency vent to blast himself backward, just as Holmes turned. Holmes stepped forward, right onto the debris spike Reeve had planted. It wasn't enough to pierce armor, but it made Holmes stumble. And for a second, he was off balance. Reeve launched himself forward, climbed the Ogren's back like a jungle cat, wrapped a training cable around his neck, and used his own falling momentum to pull. The giant fell face first into the sand. Dust and silence. Then the klaxon blared. Victory. Cadet Reeve. A stunned hush swept the arena. Even the Zalari blinked their four eyes in disbelief. Someone had actually beaten an Ogren. A human had. Reeve rolled off, coughing, barely able to rise. Medics ran out to tend to Hoon, who groaned but gave a grudging thumbs up. Threx stared down at the scene, lips curled in something that wasn't quite a smile, but close. In the medbay, Reeve lay on the exam table as the med drone scanned his cracked ribs, fractured wrist, and minor concussion. "You know," said Gal from the adjacent bed, "you really are insane." Reeve winced and grinned. "I told you. It's a Tuesday." Later that night, the arena footage replayed across every rec screen, and for the first time, the cadets didn't mock the Terran. They watched, studied, and whispered. In his quarters, Threx watched the replay in silence, rewinding, watching again. He tapped Reeve's file. Update. Exhibits predatory learning patterns. Danger level, escalating. Do not underestimate. And for the first time since the Crucible opened, Threx didn't laugh. The Crucible never slept, but that night it screamed. Red emergency lights strobed across steel corridors as klaxons howled a warning cadets had only ever heard in drills. Security breach, enemy contact, full combat alert. Reeve sat bolt upright in his bunk, heart hammering. This wasn't a simulation. Sim drills didn't shake the walls. A thunderous boom rocked the barracks. The shock waves shattered light fixtures. Dust and sparks rained from the ceiling. Gal's voice crackled through the emergency channel. "They've breached the outer dome. Real weapons, real blood. Reeve, we're under attack." Across the moon's cratered surface, a swarm of black-shelled ships descended like vultures. Karnak's raiders, merciless pirates known for slaughtering recruits during coalition exercises just to send a message. Inside the base, chaos reigned. Cadets sprinted through burning corridors. Some panicked, some froze, and Reeve moved, not away from the explosion, toward it, visual, a corridor twisted by blast damage, flames licking the ceiling, smoke choking the air, and through it, Sergeant Threx, pinned beneath a collapsed support beam, his armor sparking. A Zalari recruit lay unconscious nearby, half buried in debris. Threx's eyes widened as Reeve appeared from the haze. "What the hell are you doing, Terran? Get out! That's an order!" Reeve ignored him. He slid under the debris and braced himself, muscles screaming, body trembling. The beam weighed more than a hover truck. "You're going to die trying," Threx growled, coughing. "Maybe," Reeve grunted, "but you'll die faster." With one last heave, the impossible happened. The beam shifted, just enough. Reeve dragged Threx clear, then turned and pulled the Zalari free with him. The three collapsed behind a bulkhead just as the corridor caved in behind them. They didn't stop. Reeve helped Threx limp through the smoke, pausing only to hack a dead security terminal, rerouting power to auto turrets on the hangar deck. He reprogrammed drones, rerouted survivors, and plotted ambushes using nothing but scrap and instinct. They reached a defensive checkpoint only to find the last line of defense overrun. Karnak's raiders burst through the far corridor, sleek, vicious things with bladed forearms and plasma rifles. The remaining cadets barely held the barricades. Threx tried to stand, weapon raised. Reeves stepped in front of him. "Rest that leg, sir. You'll need it to kick my ass later." And then he charged. He moved like something born for war, sliding beneath plasma fire, tossing stun mines he'd rewired on the run. Karnak's lunged, and Reeve grappled it mid-leap, spun it into the wall, and grabbed its dropped rifle. Shots rang out. Enemies fell, one by one, until none stood but Reeve, panting in the smoke, his borrowed rifle low and his uniform torn to ribbons. Silence fell. Even the turret stopped firing. The cadets stared at him, not with amusement, not even respect, with fear, because the human hadn't just survived, he'd led. Later, as evac ships landed and coalition enforcers swept the halls, Threx sat on a stretcher, one arm in a sling, staring at the ruined base. Reeves stood beside him, arms crossed, black soot streaking his face. "Where did you learn to do all that?" Threx asked. Reeves' voice was quiet. "Earth. You people fight like devils." Reeve looked up at the stars through the cracked dome overhead. "That's just the part you've seen." Threx didn't reply, but later when he filed his after-action report, he entered something new in Reeves' profile. Tag, Field Commander, Potential Note, Instinctual Strategist. Recommendation, monitor closely, promote carefully, fearless under fire, possibly unstable. And for the first time, the Crucible owed its survival to a Terran. The chamber was cold, too cold. Reeves sat at the center of a sterile steel table, arms folded, blood still crusted on his collar. A single overhead light cast hard shadows across his face. His cracked knuckles throbbed. A long, angry bruise wrapped around his ribs where the Karnak's raider had nearly skewered him. Across the table sat Coalition Commander Halrix Vor, a Draven tactician known for dissecting minds faster than battle plans. Beside him stood a silent sentinel drone, recording every breath, every twitch. Reeve didn't blink. He didn't fidget. He just waited. Vor's eyes, multifaceted and glittering like jagged glass, studied him with unsettling calm. "We've reviewed the security footage, Cadet Reeve. Every frame, every impossible action, every unconventional decision." Reeve gave a shrug. "Adapt or die. That's what the Crucible teaches, right?" Vor didn't smile. "You rewired a supply drone to function as a proximity mine. You hotwired a shuttle's internal fuel line to detonate behind enemy lines. You took command of a mixed-species squad without authorization. Because the people who were in command were either dead or running," Reeves said, calm, measured. "And you saved the base. We're aware." Vor's voice tightened. "That's not what worries us." He tapped a glowing data pad. Dozens of images blinked by, still captures of Reeve mid-combat, calculating, relentless. A blur of motion, blood, and fire. He didn't look like a soldier. He looked like a storm. This level of aggression, of instinct, shouldn't be possible for your species. That word, shouldn't. Reeve narrowed his eyes. "Is that your problem, Commander? That I wasn't supposed to survive?" Vor leaned forward. "Our analysts are running neural scans, tracking stress indicators, hormonal spikes. You didn't just survive, Cadet. You thrived. And no one expected that from a human." Reeves stayed silent. "You're an anomaly, and the Coalition doesn't like anomalies, especially ones that make the other species nervous." Reeves' jaw tightened. "Let me guess. You want to send me back, sweep it under the rug." Vor's gaze sharpened. "What I want is irrelevant. The generals are watching now. Your name's already circulating in the deeper channels. Some think you're a rising asset. Others think you're a threat." A long pause. "Which are you, Reeve?" The silence was broken only by the hum of the observation drone. Reeve stood slowly. "Earth raised us in fire. We fought each other long before the stars noticed us. You want to know what I am?" He leaned forward, eyes hard. I'm what happens when you laugh at a human and then give him a reason to fight back. Meanwhile, in Crucible Command, Threx watched the debrief from behind a one-way observation wall, arms crossed, jaw tight. Beside him, a diplomatic officer murmured, "If we keep him here, the other species will escalate complaints. The Murtaugh Council is already calling it Terran overreach. They want him reassigned." Threx didn't answer. The officer tried again. "He's dangerous." Threx gave a slow nod. "That's the point." Later that night, Reeve walked back into the barracks. Conversation died the second he entered. Eyes followed him. A path cleared in silence. Not out of admiration, out of caution. Only Gal spoke, voice low. "You think they're going to send you home?" Reeve shook his head. "Number, they're going to watch me." He sat on the edge of his bunk, staring out the narrow window slit at the stars beyond. "And they're going to wonder if Earth was a mistake, or a warning." They didn't exile him. Not exactly. Instead, they promoted him, and then shipped him to Outpost Theta 9, a dying installation on the edge of disputed space. Officially, it was a peacekeeping post. In truth, it was a graveyard, a forgotten crater bunker hovering above the war-torn moon Sarvan X, surrounded by shifting ceasefires and whispered betrayals. Reeve knew what it was. A one-way deployment, a quiet removal, the line in the sand. The drop ship rattled like a dying lung as it pierced the moon's atmosphere. Lightning arced around the hull. The pilot, a stone-faced Solari with a permanent snarl, never looked back. "Landing in hot zone. No support. Command says hold the line until further notice." "Define further notice," Reeve muttered. The pilot didn't answer. They were already gone before Reeve hit the ground. Visual. Sarvan X's surface was a nightmare. Purple storms boiled overhead, casting hellish light across the fractured terrain. The outpost was a black wedge dug into a cliffside, its defenses offline, its comms jammed, its walls painted in old blood. Inside, a skeleton crew of 5 alien soldiers, overworked and underarmed. 2 Murtaugh, 1 Draven, 1 Vakari, and a silent warbot with half its plates rusted off. No one saluted, no one welcomed him. The Draven officer, Lieutenant Sol, barely glanced up from the malfunctioning defense grid. "Human, great. Another warm body for the meat grinder. You have orders?" Reeve handed over a sealed datapad. Sol scanned it, scoffed. "They've assigned you command." "Of what?" Reeve asked. A low laugh. "Of us." They didn't respect him. They didn't want him. And they didn't think he'd last a week. But he got to work. He rewired broken drones using parts from the mess hall oven, reprogrammed the warbot to act as a perimeter scout, reinforced the crumbling walls with local rock and repurposed blast foam. He trained the crew harder than they'd ever been trained. Not like soldiers, like survivors. And just in time. Because 3 nights later, the Karnics returned. Only this time they weren't raiders. They were an armored strike platoon. The first wave came fast. Plasma bolts tore through the upper wall. The sky was ash and fire. The Murtaugh fell back screaming. The Vakari tried to reroute power, fried herself in the process. Sol called for retreat. Reeve refused. "We hold the line, right here." "We're not built for this," Sol shouted over the comms. "Neither am I," Reeve replied, "but we're doing it anyway." Visual. Reeve atop the ramparts, a Karnix rifle in one hand, a stolen anti-armor charge in the other. He moved through fire like it was just weather, barking orders, dragging wounded back behind cover, flanking the enemy with jury-rigged mines. The warbot went down. Reeve hijacked its sensor core and used it to blind the next Karnix advance. When the Murtaugh panicked and tried to flee, Reeve tackled him, pinned him to the ground. "No one runs, not while I'm standing." "You're insane," the Murtaugh hissed. Reeve's face was a smear of ash and blood. "That's not a weakness. That's Earth." The battle lasted 7 hours. When the dust cleared, the Karnics were in pieces. The outpost still stood. Barely. And the crew, still alive. All of them. Days later, Command sent a scout to confirm what couldn't possibly be true. Reeve met them outside the gates, eyes hollow, body wrapped in bandages and torn plating. "We held the line." The scout stared at the smoldering wreckage, the charred ground, the makeshift defenses that had actually worked. He sent a single-word report back to HQ. Problem. Back at Crucible Base, Sergeant Threx received the news. He stared at the datapad for a long time. Then he laughed. Low, quiet, almost proud. You tried to bury him, and he made a kingdom out of the dirt. A week after the siege, Sarvin X hadn't calmed. It had simply learned to hold its breath. The sky above the outpost churned with violet storm fronts, but inside silence had taken root. Reeve moved through the corridors with the same focused calm he'd shown in battle, repairing defenses, restoring systems, and retraining the broken remnants of the garrison. The crew he'd inherited, once fractured and suspicious, now followed him without question. But in the shadowed chambers of Coalition Command, that loyalty was being interpreted as something else. Danger. The word was whispered in strategic circles. Reeves' name had become radioactive. His file was flagged with red markers, tagged asset unstable, and locked under diplomatic encryption. He was no longer a cadet. He was a variable, unpredictable, inspirational, contagious. At first, his victories were praised, unofficially. Then the tone shifted. The more he survived, the more his legend grew, and with it, a silent panic spread through the ranks of those who had never expected a Terran to rise this far, this fast. And so, they didn't demote him. They didn't court-martial him. They sent a transport. It arrived without warning. No resupply request had been answered. No transmission had been acknowledged. Yet there it was, descending through the storm, black and unmarked, its engines quiet and unfamiliar. Reeve watched from the wall with narrowed eyes. Gal stood beside him, scanning the transponder. Coalition code, but scrubbed clean. No division tags. No pilot ID. I know, Reeve said. They're not here to talk. The transport touched down, and 6 soldiers stepped out. Every one of them wore the obsidian armor of internal enforcement, faces hidden, rifles pre-charged, the kind of unit not used for rescue. Then came Commander Halrix Vor, eyes sharp as razors, flanked by a Vakari aide. He walked with confidence, but it was thinly veiled contempt. You're being recalled, Vor said without preamble. Reeve stayed silent. Insubordination, unauthorized command assumption, and the misuse of strategic assets without clearance. I saved the outpost, Reeve replied evenly. And in doing so, you've made every other squad look incompetent, Vor snapped. You're disrupting the chain of command, turning soldiers into zealots. This isn't Earth. This is the Coalition. We run on order. Gal stepped forward. He's the reason we're alive. Vor didn't even glance at him. You're alive for now. If you want to stay that way, stand down. Reeve's expression didn't change. If you're going to kill me, just say it. The Vakari aide shifted. The soldiers gripped their weapons tighter. I don't need to kill you, Vor said softly. I just need you to vanish. Reeve dropped his rifle to the ground slowly. The tension spiked, but instead of surrendering, he took a single step forward, and then everything happened at once. The emergency grid shorted. A flash of blue light surged down the corridor. An EMP blast, triggered remotely. Coalition rifles powered down. Armor suits flickered. Gal moved like lightning, taking down the nearest soldier. Reeve was already moving, disabling the Vakari, disarming 2 more, dragging Vor to the ground in a single, fluid motion. The ambush failed, not because of superior weapons, but because Reeve had expected it, because he knew them now, knew how they thought, how they feared. When the dust cleared, the elite team lay unconscious or bound. Vor, bleeding from a shallow gash across his jaw, looked up from the floor with a strange smile. You've just signed your death sentence. Reeve knelt beside him. I didn't sign anything. You think Earth will protect you? Reeve stood tall. I think Earth hasn't even started yet. In the darkness of Coalition space, a signal blinked into the void. Encrypted, untraceable. To Earth. Subject, immediate response required. Message. They tried to erase one of ours. The stars were silent for exactly 3 days after the signal was sent. Then they shuddered. Not metaphorically, the early warning beacons in Coalition space began failing without explanation. Long-range scanners flickered. Diplomatic outposts reported tremors from deep space folds. like something enormous had passed through subspace without triggering standard warp markers. By the time Coalition Command pieced it together, it was too late. Earth had come calling, and they hadn't come to talk. The ESS Leviathan dropped out of FTL on the edge of Jar Prime space, unannounced, uninvited, and impossibly big. A Terran dreadnought, but unlike anything the Coalition had on record. Its hull shimmered with adaptive plating, its heat signature masked by layered quantum null fields. A ghost in the void, and it wasn't alone. 12 escort ships followed, silent, formation perfect, no flags, no preambles, only a message sent on an open channel. Return our soldier, or return the consequences. Inside the Coalition's War Council chamber, chaos erupted. This is an act of aggression. No, it's a test. They want to see what we'll do. Commander Halrix Vor, face still bruised from his encounter on Sarvan X, stood stone still. They're not bluffing, he said. They know. Somehow they know what we did. Then we disavow it, a Kashari delegate snarled. Blame it on rogue elements? Vor shook his head. It's too late for that. Earth doesn't play games with deniability. If we back down now, we show weakness. But if we retaliate, he didn't finish the sentence. No one wanted to. At Outpost Theta 9, the sky cracked open with thunder as the ESS Talon, a Terran shuttlecraft, descended through the Sarvan atmosphere. Reeves stood at the landing platform, Gal beside him, silent. The shuttle touched down. No insignia, no markings. But the ramp opened with that familiar hydraulic hiss Reeve hadn't heard since boot camp. Two humans stepped out. One was older, clad in black field armor, his face creased like cracked leather. The other was a woman, tall, sharp-eyed, draped in a coat with Earth's sigil stitched in faint silver on the shoulder. She didn't waste time. You're Reeve. He nodded. Yeah, you're coming with us. Earth has questions. He glanced back at Gal, at the crew who had stood by him, bled with him. Not without them. She blinked. You're requesting asylum for non-humans? I'm requesting recognition. They followed me into fire. They didn't laugh. They learned. That's what matters. The man behind her gave the barest of nods. Spoken like someone worth saving. Reeve raised an eyebrow. That what this is? The woman stepped closer. Number, this is a message. Within 12 hours, Earth's fleet withdrew. Slow, deliberate, leaving behind only a single data packet addressed to the Coalition's top brass. Footage of the assassination attempt, of Reeve's survival, of alien officers standing down before a human cadet, of a broken outpost still standing because a Terran wouldn't yield. And beneath it, one line of text. This is what happens when you underestimate Earth. Later, in the black quiet of hyperspace, Reeves sat aboard the Talon, staring out a viewing port as the stars smeared past. Gal sat beside him, still silent, still stunned. They're going to make me into something, Reeve muttered. A name, a symbol, maybe even a warning. Gal looked over. Do you want that? Reeve gave a tired smile. I didn't want any of this, but maybe it's time they learned what Earth really is. And what's that? Reeve looked out into the dark again. A place that builds people who don't break when they are told to.